Welcome to this interview for the Salon with Dr. Donna Hicks. Donna is an associate at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard University and the former deputy director of the Program on International Conflict Analysis and Resolution. She facilitated dialogues in numerous unofficial diplomatic efforts in the Middle East, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Colombia, Cuba, Libya, and Syria. She was also a consultant to the BBC in Northern Ireland, where she co-facilitated a television series, Facing the Future, with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and she got to know John Allardyce, Lord Allardyce, who you may remember I interviewed in a previous contribution to the Salon. Donna has taught courses in conflict resolution at Harvard and at Columbia universities, and conducts seminars in the US and abroad on dignity leadership training and on the role dignity plays in resolving conflict. She also consults to corporations, governments, schools, churches, non-governmental organizations, and others on the same topics. Her book, Dignity: Its Essential Role in Resolving Conflict, was published by Yale University Press in 2011, and her second book, Leading with Dignity: How to Create a Culture that Brings Out the Best in People, was published by Yale University Press in August 2018. Based on the lessons in Leading with Dignity, the Enlightened Enterprise Academy co-created a program together with Donna, which will be rerunning again soon in an improved format. So we'll get into the interview shortly, but first let me introduce the Enlightened Enterprise Academy, the Salon, and this first series of interviews. Enterprise Academy. People in organizations of all types, in all parts of the world, increasingly recognize the 21st century calls for far more enlightened ways of thinking and getting things done. Old and outdated ideas are resulting in more frequent and larger scale crises. The old ideas are no match for the scale and complexity of the challenges we face today. Enlightened enterprise approaches are needed if we're to ensure our prosperity and well-being, and that of generations yet unborn. Greed and ruthless exploitation must give way to compassion, stewardship, trust, and cooperation. If you agree, join us, get involved. Together we can be an effective force for good in a world that desperately needs fresh thinking and new ideas. The Salon from the Enlightened Enterprise Academy is where you can hear that fresh thinking and new ideas. We bring together some of the world's leading thinkers for interviews and dialogues with our members, members of our faculty, and subscribers to the Salon. The first series of interviews for the Salon is called Inflection. We're at an inflection point in human history. In our past, pivotal moments have irrevocably reshaped our societies and propelled us forward. The First Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution that followed were such moments. The changes we're now living through will come to be recognized as another inflection point. If we make the right decisions, we can achieve another leap of progress in the human story. But the nature of the challenges we face mean the future of humanity is also threatened if we make the wrong decisions. In this context, our ability to make the right choices has never been more important. Donna, in your work, you recognize that when dignity isn't recognized, it can be seen in our inhumanity towards others as a source of most conflict. Can you explain how you came to that realization?
It didn't take me long as an international conflict resolution specialist who actually brought parties together for dialogue all over the world, Middle East, Asia, Africa, North America, Europe. I was sitting at these tables and realized that even though there were all these political issues that divided the parties, there was also another dimension going on. It was what I call the human dimension of conflict, which is all of the psychological and the emotional reactions that people have to being treated badly, and to being treated as if they didn't matter, as if, they're suffering. Who cares about the suffering of the other side? And it occurred to me that one of the reasons why parties weren't able to sign on to these peace agreements, and why peace agreements are so difficult to achieve, is because these underlying human elements of the conflict are never discussed. And it took me a while to figure out that what was happening was that people were reacting, maybe even unconsciously reacting, to not being treated with dignity, to having their dignity trampled on by the other side. And this is just, what my research shows is that when people feel like their dignity is being dishonored and violated, the first thing to go, by the way, is empathy. And they can justify doing just about anything in order to, get revenge or to get even for not being treated as if they matter. So it happened everywhere I was in the world. And it wasn't just in one conflict, but what was common is that they were all intractable, all these conflicts. And I think the source of the intractability, at least one of the sources of the intractability, is this missing link, which was how people react to feeling dishonored, and how people react when their dignity is not recognized. It's the worst case human scenario. We're capable of great things, beautiful humanity, but we're also capable of inflicting great harm on one another if we're in one of these intractable conflicts.
Yeah, but I remember you also saying that before you kind of hit on dignity as being the thing, which was almost like a breakthrough moment, you were sort of taking different kinds of approaches that weren't really cutting through. I wonder if you could just say, which approaches were being used before that weren't really cutting through, and why that might be.
Well, I remember the very first time that I had the courage to speak up to the people when they were having these enormous emotional responses to something the other side said. I remember, in my mind, I was going through, okay, as a good facilitator, I have to address this. So I decided one day that I was going to, the next time somebody exploded and had a big reaction, that I was going to say, okay, stop. Can we just stop here? Can we stop? And I really would like to discuss, if you're willing, what was underlying that big emotional response that you just had. And they would look at me and say, emotions? This isn't about emotions. This is about justice. This is about identity. This is about fair. I said, okay, wrong word. So anyway, I go back to Harvard and I convene a group of people who are experts in trauma. And so for a year, we met together to try to figure out how to address the obvious traumas that both sides were experiencing in their communities, because conflict, people were dying, And so I felt so equipped. I felt really good that year after, when I would sit at those tables, see the big response. And I remember the first time, I think I was in Sri Lanka. I remember the first time I said, oh, gee, I just saw that big emotional response that you had. I said, would it be possible if we could talk about it? Because I have a feeling that underlying that big response are traumas that your communities have endured. And you're just expressing that trauma. And they stopped and looked at me and said, trauma? No, this is not about trauma. This is about justice. This is about fairness. This is about, I said, okay. All right, so now I've got two strikes against me. And as you pointed out, I one day, after thinking, okay, what's the word I can use? What's the word that will feel legitimate to them or even validating to them. And I just was walking down the street one day and I said, I know what that word is. If they were to say, wanted to say what they felt inside them, the revenge, the resentment, they would want to say something like this. How dare you treat us this way? Can't you see we're human beings and you're doing nothing about it? Can't you see our communities are suffering and you won't bring an end to this conflict? So when I realized that, I thought, this is about their dignity. This is about their humanity that's being trampled on. And I define dignity very simply, and that is our inherent value and worth. It's the worth that we were all humans born with when we enter the world. So, but we're also vulnerable to having that dignity assaulted. And so what we were seeing in these conflicts and these big responses was people's reaction to having their dignity trampled on. And when I said the word, this is about your dignity, when I said that to them, oh my gosh, they were like, they sat up straighter and they said, looked at me and paused, they were reflecting. And they said, yeah, this is about our dignity. Not only is it about our dignity sitting here at the table, but the dignity of our ancestors, the dignity of everybody in our community. And so, I don't know, Paul, that word, it's a magical word. It opens doors. They felt validated when I used that word. And they were, more importantly, they felt willing to open up and have a discussion about what it was like from that human point of view. What is it like as a human being to be engaged in such a horrific conflict? So that was the magical moment. And to this day, I think, oh my gosh, thank you. I don't know where that word came from, but somehow I think that word's been following me around for quite some time.
And I'm pretty sure it will continue to do so for quite some time,
Yes.
given the amount of conflict we see in the world today. And not just the big kind of conflicts that you're talking about, between countries or between factions within countries, but relating to the point you just made, that also relates to conflict in the workplace, conflict between different companies, or even with governments, for example. Any kind of conflict situation, if people rewind and watch what you've just said, they could relate it to any kind of conflict. Is that the case, or that it certainly seemed to be the case from my experience?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And what happened after I had this big epiphany about dignity and how it could be used to help resolve these conflicts, these big intractable conflicts, I realized that I really needed to write about this because I had a feeling that the power behind this word dignity would be able to, help resolve conflicts, certainly at that big level, but I wasn't sure. In the beginning, I thought I was writing this just for my international conflict resolution colleagues. But what ended up happening after I wrote my first book, which is Dignity, Its Essential Role in Resolving Conflict, I got calls, and when it was published, I got calls from the corporate world, from healthcare, from education, from nonprofits of all kinds, philanthropies, faith communities, and everybody, after they read that book, they felt, oh my gosh, I think she's nailed what's going on inside our organization, whether it was the business community or, nonprofits. People felt, yeah, this is why, how a workplace can turn toxic when people feel like they're being dismissed, they're not being recognized, they're treated unfairly, they're discriminated against. All these are dignity issues. And I made that explicit because one of the things that when I write, I want to be very clear. I put my academic hat away and I really want to make this concept, this is what I was thinking at the time, and I still believe, I want to make this concept of dignity something people can use. And you don't need to be an academic. You don't need to be an international conflict resolution specialist. You need to be a human being who would like to develop these skills, and they apply across the board to the workplace. And, you know, I to this day, I'm still working in the corporate community, you know, giving keynotes and doing trainings and all of that. And it is something that everybody, no matter what their background is, everybody wants to be treated with dignity. It's what I call our highest common denominator. That desire to be seen, to be heard, to be recognized, all those beautiful things that we all of us have a yearning for almost. And in our relationships, the sad news is, Paul, in our relationships, because we haven't been educated about dignity, we suffer a lot in relationships, no matter where they are.
Yeah, I think it does boil down to relationships of all different kinds.
Yeah.
Even our own relationship with ourselves, sometimes we don't even look after our own dignity quite often, I would argue as well. But we'll back to some of these themes as we go through the questions. But I wanted to just run by you the second question I wanted to ask, which is, I think you'd agree that dignity relates to our sense of being, our identity, and is reflected in the first 5 of the 10 elements of dignity that you identify, which are acceptance, inclusion, safety, acknowledgement, and recognition. And I wonder if you could briefly introduce the 5 elements by way of explanation, so we could go through them in that order. I think that probably makes sense.
Sure.
So acceptance would be the first one.
Yeah, acceptance of identity. So I realized that in order to use this dignity concept, what I now call the dignity model, to use it to address these relationship problems and these conflicts, no matter what, you know, no matter where we apply them, in order to do that, I felt like I had to make really clear what it looked like in everyday life to, number one, have your dignity honored, but also to have your dignity violated. What is that? Because they're the flip side of the same coin. And so what I did, Paul, was I interviewed people from all over the world and asked them to tell me about a time when they felt their dignity was either honored or violated. And I mean, the funny story behind that question is that the vast majority of people I interviewed, no matter where I was in the world, all said more about the times in which they were violated. They could hardly think of times when they felt their dignity was being honored. So anyway, I came up with, I had hundreds of interviews, and there emerged a pattern in all of these interviews, and which surprised me because I thought there were going to be cultural differences in people's understanding of this. But when you boil it down to the emotional content of these dignity, either honorings or violations, they were the same. And what ended up by happening was they were 10 themes, 10 patterns. The first of which are the ones that you just mentioned: acceptance of identity, inclusion, safety, acknowledgement, and recognition. So what do I mean by that? Okay, so people want their identity accepted, no matter their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their physical capability, gender, everything. Everybody wants to be thought of as equal in dignity. And even I always get this question, well, what about people who are like in authority positions and who have power over us? And I respond by saying, look, we may differ in power, but we are all equal in dignity. So status isn't enough to give us more dignity. There's no such thing. Every human being enters the world with dignity, period, and stop. But also, every human being comes into the world vulnerable to having that dignity dishonored and unrecognized.
And that represents a distinction between dignity and respect, which quite often get
Right.
confused.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because this was a turning point when I realized that, because I'd read all the literature on respect, and the difference that I came to understand was that dignity is inherent. As I said, all of us have dignity. We were born with it. You know, typically, if I were giving a PowerPoint, I'd show pictures of these little infant babies and say, look, you know, can you argue with me that these precious little ones don't have inherent value and worth? So that is the baseline. We all deserve to be treated with dignity because we have dignity. We were born with it. Whereas respect, on the other hand, has to be earned. And so this issue, I was just on the phone the other day with a woman who was struggling with this issue about dignity and respect. And she said, once she heard my distinction here, because people can accept that others have dignity. They may not like them. They may not, you know, want to be their friends. But what my model points out is that it's your obligation to treat people with dignity, but you don't have to respect them. And people just kind of say, oh yeah, I can do that. You know, I can treat somebody with dignity, but I don't have to respect them. That feels like a possibility to people in conflict. It's okay. Because asking for respect is a bridge too far, you know, because respect has to be earned.
Yeah, and I guess you do have to treat them with dignity because you would expect them to treat you with dignity, whether they were of
Yes.
the same faith or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Well, just by virtue of our shared humanity. I mean, we're so far from this, Paul. We are so far from this. I mean, this is an aspirational model because I think, you know, it's so hard, especially here in the United States, where there's such divisiveness among us here. Even the idea of treating somebody with dignity by listening to them or trying to gain a deeper understanding or whatever, it's so hard. So I'm not saying this makes it easy, but just making that distinction is helpful because people say, phew, God, I never thought I could respect that guy who, you know, murdered my daughter. I can't respect that guy, you know? So anyway, that's
Well,
good.
it's kind of hard in the face of all of the forces that are deliberately trying to divide us,
And that too.
and the powerful media and their powerful forces.
Yep.
So if we could only kind of recognize that there's more that unites us than divides us, then we may begin to start to make some progress. But divide and rule is the oldest trick in the book. It goes back to ancient times, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And I mean, the fashionable word these days is being triggered. It seems to me that we need to be educated to be less easily triggered and more willing to consider using the dignity concept when we feel
Yeah.
like we are being triggered or somebody's trying to trigger us.
Well, that's an interesting point because one of the things that I learned from the trauma seminar that I had for a year back at Harvard was that these triggering elements, like you've just described, where you get angry, you want revenge, you want to take the bait, you want to get even. Those are actually common and it's part of our shared humanity because those are inherited responses to threat. And so we humans, you know, we have several of these triggers where they just completely feels automatic that they get activated. But the good news about these inherent responses, well, we call them self-preservation instincts that get triggered when we feel we're being threatened. The good thing is that we have evolved another part of our brain apparatus, which gives us the potential to be able to stop those responses. We can push a pause button when we feel that trigger coming up. If we're educated on how to halt these responses and just like take a break, take a minute, take a breath. I mean, I have a neuroscientist friend who said to me, Donna, don't tell people to count to 10 because that doesn't work. Tell people they have to take 10 deep breaths because that breathing connects the vagus nerve up to the brain and helps us push that pause button. So, but we have to know, even before anything else, Paul, we have to know that these triggers are inherent also.
Yeah.
As part of our self-preservation, our survival instincts. But, you know, we don't need those anymore. We needed them 100,000 years ago when they evolved in the human species, but we don't need those anymore. They're good as a signal. And it helps us figure out, okay, how am I going to want to react here? Do I want to continue the downward spiral of dignity violations, or do I want to try to redirect this energy, this negative energy, and turn it into a way to seek deeper understanding, for example?
I like the other analogy you use as well as the 10 deep breaths, the step up to the balcony and sort
Oh,
of
step up to the balcony. Yeah.
you could maybe just
Well,
explain that one briefly.
sure. My friend and colleague Ron Heifetz is a leadership expert here at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, and he always talks about how to really make a choice when you're interacting with someone. And if you're feeling that trigger, like you just described, if you're feeling that trigger, another thing, after you push the pause button and you take those 10 breaths, he says, take a trip up to the balcony. In your mind, imagine yourself walking up a steep set of stairs onto a balcony where you can see yourself in interaction with this other person. And just having that perspective, you can see when maybe what contribution you have made to this failed interaction. You know, it gives you an opportunity to reflect rather than respond. And thinking about the balcony as a little sanctuary, a place where you can go to decide how you want to choose, what ways you want to respond to the bad behavior of others. Because if we take the bait and we just respond to somebody who violates our dignity with another dignity violation, we're just creating a mountain of violations. We're not doing anything to stop the cycle of harm and the cycle of violation. So it's, I love that metaphor and I use it all the time. Fortunately, I've got permission to use it.
Well, they're good and practical. So I think, that's what we're trying to convey in these sessions is practical things that people
Practical.
can take away as insights and do something with. As you
Yep.
say, we're not just talking academic theories here, we're talking about real world stuff.
Yes.
So did you want to talk about a bit more about the other of those first five I
Yeah.
mentioned?
So the accepting identity and is one element, one of these common themes that I found. And by the way, the reason why I think that people did not show cultural, differences in this is because when we're really talking about a unit of analysis here, which is the human species, it isn't, North Americans versus Europeans versus Asians, South Americans, this is about what it means to be a human being. And I think that all these five that you've pointed out, like you said, they're clearly at work when we feel like we have been insulted, we've been threatened, we've been violated. And the second one, after the acceptance of identity, is inclusion. People everywhere just want to feel that sense of belonging. They want to feel like they belong to their country, to their community, to their work environment. No matter what it is, humans have a very, very strong desire for connection and belonging. And when that's, people get so isolated when this inclusion element isn't in their everyday reality. It's a terrible feeling of being on the margins all the time, and they feel isolated and they feel lonely and disconnected. So you can see why everybody wants to be included. Everybody wants to feel like they belong. And safety, well, this is part of this is part of belonging in a sense, because people want to feel safe. If they walk into an environment and they don't feel like they belong, they're constantly looking over their shoulder. Do I have to watch who's here? Or, with racism, for example, I'll just use one ism. With racism, this is a common response. Oh, I don't fit here. I'm feeling a little unsafe. I'm feeling a little nervous. So safety is enormous. The desire to feel safe, and I'm not just talking about physical safety, although that's clearly important, but I'm also talking about psychological safety. And my friend Amy Edmondson has really described this beautifully, and it's interesting because it shows up in the workplace, especially all the time. And because when I first went into the corporate world to try to resolve some conflicts between management and the employees, I did interviews with people. I said, okay, tell me, here are the 10 elements of dignity. Tell me which ones you feel are violated most of the time in your work environment. And lo and behold, shocked me, but 80% of the people who responded said safety was violated by their bosses or their managers or their supervisors. And I remember saying to them, safety? Are you kidding? And they'd say, no, I'm not kidding. They'd say, I don't feel safe to speak up when somebody violates my dignity, when my boss, my supervisor violates my dignity. I would feel like, oh my gosh, what are the consequences going to be if I speak up to my boss and say you violated my dignity? Or, would I even get a good performance review? Wouldn't it threaten that? Or possibly lose their job? So I was shocked at the omnipresence of this element of dignity in the workforce, because that was my first foray into the business world. But even after that, every other organization that I went to and did some trainings and introduced the dignity model, everybody said the same thing. They don't feel safe to speak up when something goes wrong, when they're humiliated or whatever the dignity violation is.
Actually, just yesterday I read an article. I think it's in Forbes. I'm not sure, but I'll put a link to the article uh, with the video. And it was saying that most people don't want to go back to work post-COVID, not for any health reasons, not because of COVID or anything like that, but because they feel scared in the workplace. And I think it was an American survey, and I guess they're scared in the workplace now because of the political division being taken into the workplace. It's not just outside of work. But
Yeah.
more than 50% of people said they just didn't want to go to work because they don't want the conflict and confrontation that they experience on a daily basis in the workplace. So that's consistent with what you've just
It's
said.
consistent. Yeah, I've heard that a lot too, Paul, just, anecdotally. I haven't done any research so that I'd be interested in this Forbes article. But anecdotally, people having spent COVID at home and working from home and, not having and experiencing those conflicts. Well, sometimes they do. You can even get into conflict online, but I think most of the people, like those who you just described, feel, I don't want to expose myself to that negativity anymore. I'm just, people are done with that. That's why, I mean, I'm getting such an increase in traction from organizations. I mean, I was always busy, but it's been even more so under these circumstances that you've described, with people going back to work, because it's like, I know people write to me and said, can you go and do some leadership training with my bosses, because they need this information, they need to know how important it is to have people inside, physically present with one another, aware of the impact of their actions on other people. Because most people aren't even conscious of it, Paul, when they violate dignity.
No, I think many times they're probably not conscious of it, but it boils down to a certain misunderstanding about power and the impact of power, but also certain misunderstanding about appropriate styles of leadership. Um, the traditional stereotype view of the leader is somebody that has power. So we need to, in a way of actually sort of rethinking approaches to leadership that are more appropriate. Dignity can provide some of the tools for thinking about that, whether we're talking about leaders in government, leaders in companies, or other types of organizations.
Oh, it's all, yes. And that's what compelled me once I went into the corporate world and into healthcare and the other venues. What I realized was, Paul, that if the leadership, if they weren't on board with this dignity framing of how to be together in the organization, if they weren't walking the talk and setting the tone and showing their employees what it looks like to be treated well, to be, treated with dignity, they will then, if they're not, if they haven't integrated into their repertoire, you're going to see toxic work cultures, because they can be the biggest perpetrators of the indignities. And it's not just the interpersonal indignities, Paul, but it's also the systemic and structural indignities that hold the organization together. And especially, of course, as you well know, the policy that gets created. So these indignities come from two different layers with leadership. It's the interpersonal, so if you're ignorant of how to treat people with dignity, well, you're just going to, end up violating your people's dignity, and they're going to feel scared to speak up. So that's how that toxic culture gets created. But also, if there are vast indignities in the policies that you create, if there's discriminatory policies or policies that people don't feel are fair, so it's I think crucial that leaders understand this. And they, now, I mean, what's wonderful here in the US, we have many organizations that are actually teaching dignity awareness in business schools and MBA programs. So that's great. But I wanted to say also one other thing. If you're in a position of authority, in a leadership position in an organization, you don't have more dignity than anybody else, as I just pointed out about acceptance of identity. In fact, you are more responsible for creating a dignity environment in your organization. Your responsibility goes up. I mean, everybody's responsible in the organization for treating each other with dignity, but leadership is paramount, responsible.
I think it's kind of based on a misunderstanding of power, but also dignity. So what I mean by that is I refer a lot to Mary Parker Follett, who was writing in the early 1900s. So she sums it up quite nicely. The real power is power with, not power over.
Over, yeah.
Which sums it up really nicely. But having not now working in a company, but having been the CEO of a company, only a small team, but the biggest source of dignity for me was enhancing the dignity of others. So the more I could do to improve the dignity of the team, actually, not only the less work I had to do, the less I had to manage, but actually, the more your own sense of dignity is increased.
Absolutely, because I have this line in my first book: when you honor somebody's dignity, you strengthen your own. So it is, yeah, it's a no-brainer. This is something that everyone can use, but especially people in leadership positions. And I just wanted to add to your comment about when you treat your people well, when you did when you were CEO. The other thing that happens when people feel as if they're treated as if they matter, the other thing that happens is employee engagement increases. What's the other one? The willingness to give discretionary energy.
Yeah, go the extra mile. And
oh, listen, we've got a project. I can stay until 6 o'clock tonight. I can do this and help you out. The loyalty increases. Job retention You don't have to deal with all that turnover. And finally, profits increase, or whatever your mission is. The mission is enhanced when everybody's like working together as a team. It's like, yeah, we can do this. We can make this happen, whatever this is, whatever your business objectives are. But it is, again, it's a no-brainer. This is something every leader should understand. First thing in business school, you should get this Dignity 101 training.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the answer to the intractable or seemingly intractable problem of employee engagement. Gallup have been surveying and putting out reports on employee engagement for about 20 years now.
Yeah.
Consistently, they find that almost all employees are partially or fully disengaged with the work that they're doing, and only a tiny percentage fully engaged. And it kind of isn't surprising when you stop to think about it. If they're not respected, if they feel they're not acknowledged and recognized, all of the different elements that we talk about in this first 5 elements, then
go
why would
ahead.
they want to engage? Yeah,
Yeah.
just finish off the 5 elements and then we'll move on to.
I'm sorry because I keep getting all sidetracked, but it's all connected, Paul,
Yeah.
it's all connected. So acknowledgement, I have to tell you a story about a conversation that I had with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I had the amazing experience of working with him for almost a decade. And one of the things he taught me, I learned so much, but this piece about acknowledgement was so significant because I remember saying to him, okay, Arch, because he wanted us to call him Arch, you are like the champion of reconciliation all over the world. What you did in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, it was so amazing what you did, how you reconnected people and you got a reconciliation movement going. I said, what do you think it takes for people to put the past to rest and to move on and to reconnect? What does it take? And he looked at me and he, kind of thought about it for a minute. And he said, well, it's pretty simple, Donna. When people have been roughed up, they need acknowledgement for the suffering they've endured. And that just rang so true to me. Something went off in my brain. It's like, oh yeah, if somebody's been mistreating you and they come to you and say, boy, I really just violated your dignity. I treated you so unfairly. I was having a bad day. I'm sorry. That kind of acknowledgement of what you've been through, what suffering you've endured because of the bad behavior of the perpetrator, that he says it's like the sweet spot. It's the sweet spot that people can turn around. And the other thing that he pointed out was that you don't just you don't need to have the perpetrator who inflicted the harm to begin with. You don't even need that person to acknowledge your suffering. You can get that from anybody around you because people want to hear what happened to you was wrong. It should never have happened. People want to hear that because they feel it. It's in their, in their bones. They feel that sense of having been so mistreated. So, and he said, so we can do that for each other. He says we can acknowledge each other's dignity violations, and it won't be quite as effective as the person who actually offended you. But we can do that for each other too. Just saying to people, oh my gosh, I just heard your story. Or even more importantly, I was just in a staff meeting where I saw that our boss violated your dignity. You could go up to that person afterward and say, oh, I just want to tell you that was awful. That should have never happened. So this is a key element. People want this desperately. They want recognition of the suffering they've endured.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the main things that they criticize politicians for. But
Yeah.
we might touch on that again. As we were talking about Desmond Tutu, then though, I could actually visualize and hear him saying what he said he mentioned to you, and I heard the cheeky giggle that he had that went with it.
Yes, it's always the cheeky giggle.
But I
Yeah.
like also one of the things he said in your first book in the foreword he wrote for it, which was that we should all be agents of dignity. And I
Yeah.
think that any leader that isn't kind of willing to stand up, sign up to, and become an agent of dignity shouldn't call himself a leader. But I'm not going to ask you to agree with that. That's just a personal opinion of mine.
I personally would love that, Paul. And of course I agree with you. Well, yeah. I mean, our leadership, all across the world. I mean, I think any leader, any part of the world could have their experiences enhanced by recognizing the power behind, talk about power, the power behind acknowledging someone's dignity or recognizing someone's dignity. I mean, it's so huge, the power that comes from a dignity honoring. And, we have to ask ourselves the question, which do we want to be? Do we want to be a dignity agent, or do we want to be a perpetrator of indignity? It comes down to that, really. It really boils down to that. And the last, by the way, so this links into the last, the five elements that you pointed out. The recognition. People want recognition, especially in the workplace, by the way, especially in the workplace. But people want recognition for the contributions that they've made to the well-being of the company. If somebody does a nice job, people want a little pat on the back and say, hey, thank you. You really made a very nice contribution to the project that you've been working on with the rest of us. So thank you. And you know what, Paul, we're not talking about really complicated communication skills here. We're talking about, oh yeah, being able to see what the other people are, what your employees are doing, and paying attention. That's another key element here. You have to pay attention to actually pick up on what those contributions are. So if you're so busy as a leader that you can't even see that, oh, wow, she just made a huge difference here in this project, I have to go and tell her, thank you so much for doing what you did, because you made a shift in this project. So, it's just not rocket science, but it's something that you have to develop an awareness of. And, if you think of all the things you learn in business school about business, issues and objectives and all of that, I think the dignity stuff is easier than all of these complicated business issues that you have to deal with.
Actually,
But
that maybe is why it's not taught in business schools, because
maybe.
it's
Yeah,
not thought to be complicated enough. But I
yeah,
think that it is really simple. I mean, basically, it boils down to treating other people like you would want to be treated yourself,
yeah.
and helping people become the best they can be. I mean, that's what most people want. It is really easy, but as you say, it's worth just kind of emphasizing the organizational structures, systems, policies, and things that organizations have in place often are the things that prevent the leader from being the leader they could be, the leader they maybe ought to be, want to be, and so on. And so the leader might get it, but every day may be sort of hamstrung by all of these obstacles that I've got to overcome, and the incentives that are put in place to kind of dehumanize them to a large extent. So these issues
Yeah.
need to be really carefully kind of thought through. Um, there's I think it was one of the systems thinkers we've been looking at, Stafford Beers. Um, he uses the term POSSEWID, which basically stands for the purpose of a system is what it does. And basically, we know that many systems are not working. They're not working for the company. They're not working for the people in the company. But the system is designed to do what it does. If we're not happy with what the outcome is, we need to redesign the system,
Right.
and that means the policies and so on. So yeah, that's the stuff that's the link into the way business schools should be teaching this.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll start taking it a bit more seriously.
Yeah,
So,
in addition to just one little footnote, in addition to what you said about treat people the way you would like to be treated, there's another quote from Goethe that I also like, which is treat people the way they want to be, and they can be, no, treat people the way they want to be, and they can become what they're capable of being.
yeah,
So
actually,
that,
that's a
you know,
great quote because that
isn't
ties the
that
two
great?
things
Because
I
then
said.
you help them develop
Yeah.
growth. Yeah. So those two things together, I love those two things together because um, it's a reminder. It's just a reminder that, hey, boy, I mean, it's not common to think of the workplace and as a source of human growth, but I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there.
So, was there anything else you wanted to say on recognition, or have we covered the 5 elements now?
Well, I think recognition is just, yeah, just wanting to be seen and wanting to be recognized for, what you've done. You want to, yeah, if you, a little bit of praise goes a long way for people.
Okay, so let me then move to the next question, which is following straight on, which is that the 5 elements they all seem to be essential to relating, our ability to be able to relate and manage relationships and do so effectively. So I wonder whether you consider it to be sort of a quality of our relationship, sorry, the quality of our relationships that determine the quality of our lives and what it means to be human.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely think so. And so the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. I do believe that. And yet, this is another example, Paul, of I think, failures in our educational system, because if that's true, we should be teaching this dignity stuff, how to relate to each other in a way where we both feel like we're being heard, we're being seen, we're being recognized, all of that, we're treated fairly. If we don't know those basics, it's like the basic ABCs. In fact, we should say ABCD, because we need the dignity there. In addition to the ABCs, we need to be teaching the D, which is the dignity. And I mean, why wouldn't this be in schools? And I mean, the good news is that since my first book came out, which was 2011, this is in schools a lot of places in the United States and other parts of the world as well. Teachers are teaching this. In fact, I have a school out in California that is using dignity as their brand. So creating dignity leaders, a private school out in La Jolla Country Day School. So if this is really one of the essential ingredients, why has it been missing for so long? Why have we ignored this?
Well,
Educators.
I think so. I think we're going to come back to that a bit later on, but I wanted to read a quote from the first book, towards the end of the first book, which really kind of stresses why what we've said so far is so important and so relevant to what's going on in the world today. But you say most people are willing and ready to do whatever it takes to do to experience a better quality of life and to understand what dignity provides. They're tired of not feeling good about themselves, tired of being in relationships that aren't working, tired of living their lives without deep meaning and purpose. They want to become what they're capable of being. That's the quote. And I wanted to just ask you, can you comment on that as it relates to current political climate in the US, but not just in the US, because I think actually we've got this problem very internationally these days. Um, I think we've kind of touched on it in what we've said so far, but I wanted to just that quote includes lots of different elements that I think are really topical, and I wanted to ask you if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, the piece that I would add to it, and certainly it does relate to everything that's going on today, but the piece I think is one of the most fundamental aspects of what I'm calling the dignity model. And another thing that I learned from Archbishop Tutu is that even though we are all born with dignity and it's part of our DNA, we come into the world with it, not very many of us recognize and accept our own dignity. So, and there's consequences to that, which I'll get to in a minute. But Tutu, it was funny, we were having a conversation over coffee one day, and he said to me, when we were first getting to know each other, he said, so tell me, how did you arrive at this concept of dignity? He said, it's to me, he said, it's so important. How did you arrive at it? And I explained the story, that I told earlier. And I said that, some of the parties of these conflicts would come to me and say, Donna, one of the reasons why we're fighting this conflict, we're engaged in this conflict and fighting this war, is because the other side stripped us of our dignity and we're fighting to get it back. And I told Tutu this with that kind of energy. And he looked at me and he said, what are you talking about? I said, what don't you understand? And he said, nobody can take away our dignity. And I said, well, that's just what they told me. That's what they told me. I'm saying, because I was so embarrassed. I was like being scolded by him. And he said, Donna, with a stern face, don't ever perpetuate that myth. Don't tell people, oh yeah, I can see why you do that. Don't do that. Because then he said to me, how do you think we Black South Africans got through apartheid, that regime? How do you think we survived that? And I said, tell me. And he said, we survived it because we knew that our dignity was in our hands only and that nobody could take it away from us. And we were not going to give it up for anybody either. And he said, that's what got Mandela through Robben Island, 27 years in Robben Island. That's what got him through. So I said, oh my gosh, okay. Now I understand the depth of your reaction. And I said to him, I so appreciate this, because I had to admit, there were times when I was thinking, well, yeah, people do have their dignity stripped from them. But he said, never say that, never. So I'm I'm repeating what he told me never to do. So anyway, I think the first order of business in creating relationships or in creating environments where dignity is being threatened, like you're saying in our political divide here, is knowing that our dignity is in our hands only. Because I think so much of what I hear here in the United States is that one of the reasons why they resort to violence is because they feel like they're being threatened. Their dignity's being threatened. Nobody's seeing them. Nobody's recognizing, their lived experience. And so the first thing that I do, the first order of business always, no matter what groups I'm convening, is to make this Tutu point that, our dignity is in our hands and nobody can take it away. Now, it's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to have chronic violations of your dignity by certain groups. People who are suffering racism or homophobia or sexism, whatever it is. People need to heal from those violations. You can't just sweep them under the carpet and say, oh, that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. So there is still healing that has to be done. And we haven't really talked about healing here much, Paul, but I think that the point is that the first step in that process of externalizing those dignity violations, getting them outside of you, is to recognize that I've got this dignity. I've got it, I've got it inside me. I need to pay attention. Just like if you fell and you injured your knee or something, you'd go to the hospital and get it taken care of. We need to heal from these violations too. And I think a lot of what we could do here to address the divide, going back to your original point, is to, is to have processes, community events where people can talk about the ways in which they feel maybe the other side, whatever the other side is, has violated their dignity. So, and it's not a complicated process. You just have to listen. You have to desire. You have to want to have a deeper understanding. That, by the way, is another one of the elements of dignity, is to seek deeper understanding. People want to be understood. They welcome having an opportunity to sit down and say, look, this is what happened to me. And if it's possible to get an acknowledgement on top of that, that's where the real healing begins.
Yeah, but the very first understanding is the person themselves understanding, as you just said, that they are in charge of their own dignity and it can't be taken away from them. And as you just mentioned, it's almost every civil rights in campaigner as an individual or a movement is focused on that factor. And I also remember reading Viktor Frankl, who explains in similar ways, man's search for meaning
And search for
and
meaning. Yeah.
what got him through the prison camp situation. It's a very similar kind of story.
Yeah.
So recognizing our own sense of self-worth, our own dignity, and recognizing that can only be given away by us or ignored by us is a really important first step. We want to go in the conversation, turn to some of the practical steps for addressing and looking at all of this in a more positive light. But before I do, I wanted to just kind of quote you again from, I think it's probably from the second book this time, but really to emphasize and underpin exactly why this is so important, and people should take the time out to really pay attention and understand what we're trying to get at in this conversation. So you say, when we sense that our worth is being threatened, we're flooded by feelings of dread and shame. With destabilized feelings that are painful and difficult to overcome. Most of us, you say, would do about almost anything to avoid those kind of dreaded feelings, which are part and parcel of an injury to dignity. When we experience harm or self-preservation instincts are flared up and become very strong, feelings of humiliation, rage, and self-righteousness and revenge are created. And some humans who've experienced chronic violations of dignity have gone to the extremes of either taking their own lives to bring an end to the intolerable suffering. Others do the opposite and go towards even killing those that cause the injury or their vulnerability. And I'm just thinking, those few sentences, when we think about what's going on in the world right now, and I don't mean just with the conflict in the Middle East or the division in politics in America and other parts of the world, but also, there are examples of one side of what you've just described, where the massive increase in the rates of suicide amongst certain groups in society, certain age group of men in the UK, for example, but also the opioid crisis, and that so there are kind of two reactions: fight or flight. I think is the way of summing them up. And I wanted to just ask if you got anything you wanted to comment on that before we move on to the next bit.
Well, that's the tragedy that is pretty much everywhere, at least in the Western world that I know of. I've heard people, my colleagues like you and others in the UK, talking about the epidemic, actually, of lack of self-worth and epidemic of suicides and drug addiction. We certainly have that here too. And that is a huge tragedy to me, because this is something we could do something about. I think, just going back to that main point, that if people could get the therapy that they need to show, hey, look, you have self-worth. You don't even have to do anything to have dignity. If that simple awareness can, I mean, I have a lot of therapists who use the dignity model, and they say to me, they tell me that just recognizing that their own self-worth it's the first step. It's not the only step. There's many steps to go, especially in dealing with drug addiction and this loneliness. I mean, loneliness that we're experiencing here that can lead to suicide. They tell me that it's like the people say, their clients say to them, how come nobody told me that before? You know, I just feel like a bad person. I feel like nobody values me. Nobody. And in my friends who are therapists, they say, well, you need to start with yourself. You need to know that you are invaluable. You're priceless and you're irreplaceable. So if you are gone, you know, the world is missing out on having you a part of it. So, you know, there's all sorts of ways to initiate this dignity conversation, and then to, you know, start a healing process where they can recognize why they probably had a very bad experience in their early years, maybe bad parenting, maybe bad experiences with school where they were bullied. I mean, there's a very direct line that you can draw between people feeling that sense of utter despair and early childhood traumas, early childhood violations of their dignity. So I think one of the things that we need to emphasize here with this dignity model is that we need to understand what it means to be human. We need a deeper understanding of that. And I'm not talking about just me and my little world. I'm talking at the species level. What is it that drives us? What is it that drives us toward, like you said, toward picking up a gun and killing somebody else? Or what drives us to pick up a gun and kill ourselves? What is that? And this, I think it demonstrates the fragility of our dignity. You know, earlier I said, you know, we're all vulnerable to having our dignity assaulted. I think the human condition, we need to pay much more attention to our human frailties and how delicate we actually are as human beings. You know, we act like we're these big, strong, macho people and everything. But the fact is, you know, it hurts us when somebody shames us. It hurts us when someone, you know, grossly violates our, not even grossly, but just even violates our dignity in a little, you know, a little way. But the most important thing, I think, for our people here listening is to understand the neuroscience of this process of having your dignity violated. What they're showing is that the pain inflicted on people who have had their dignity violated, they call it social pain. The pain that's inflicted, that you experience when you have your dignity violated, shows up in the same area of the brain as if you've experienced a physical injury. Think about that for a minute. What do we do when we get a physical injury? Well, we, you know, first thing, go to the emergency room or go to our doctor, whatever, get it fixed up. But when we experience a wound to our dignity, we tend to just not even talk about it because it's so embarrassing. It's that dreaded feeling you were referring to earlier. So these dignity violations stockpile, Paul, until they have a triggering moment and they either kill somebody or they kill themselves. See, we have to understand this.
Yeah, I think the biological explanation is quite interesting, because I think actually we intuitively know that, because we talk about emotional scars and so on. So, you know, if it's a physical injury, you quite often get a scar. I mean, we know
Yeah.
when we use terms like emotional scars, that it is that painful. But I guess it also explains why. You'd say there are kind of two reactions when we feel threatened. One is self-preservation, and that's, we've just been kind of talking about, maybe biological, to do with neuroscience. But the other is also through, you could say, self-extension instinct.
Yeah.
Can you explain what self-extension instincts are?
Well, again, I think one of the lessons of the dignity model is to know that, and again, it's part of self-knowledge and a part of our species knowledge, what it means to be a human, is that we have a choice. We humans have a choice. If we're going to evolve into another newer consciousness that recognizes the dignity of others, I just think that we have to make a commitment to pushing that pause button when we feel triggered, finding the balcony, getting up on those stairs and going there and decide, what are we going to do here? Hey, we, meaning internal me and I and me inside us. What are we going to do here? How are we going to react to this? We have a choice to make, a choice that will either trigger those self-preservation instincts, or we have a choice that will extend us, extend our consciousness, and extend our growth, and actually make a choice that defies that biological impulse to involuntarily become a dignity violator back and to take the bait. So we have a choice to make. And, you know, there's this great evolutionary biologist here, E.O. Wilson, who says, you know, at the end of his extensive life about studying the human experience and studying human evolution and where we've ended up, he believes that we've ended up at a point here where we have to make that choice. We can either choose self-preservation or we can choose self-expansion. And the idea being, we have to work at this choice. This isn't going to come easy. What comes easy for us are the involuntary, you know, fight and flight reactions. That's one of these self-preservation instincts. So in order to evolve into that newer consciousness, we have to work at it. We have to, number one, we have to choose that that's what we want to do by getting up on the balcony and so on. But it also makes us define that commitment. What does that mean for me? I want to grow and flourish as a human being rather than be stuck in these self-preservation survival instincts. I want to do more than survive. I want to thrive and flourish as a human being. I want to become the most that I can be. And in order to do that, if you don't have dignity as part of your toolkit, or maybe even the platform from which you know, engage in life, you're not going to flourish.
So that takes me to a point that I wanted to bring up, which is about how important do you think it is that we incorporate this into what gets taught early on in school life? But also, you know, we don't want to only just focus on next generations, and we need to sort out older generations today as well. Otherwise, we're going to continue to suffer for some considerable time. So, you know, you and I both know of one person who's working on trying to teach values-based education in schools, of which teaching dignity is going to be a major part. But also, we know of another person who's working on the inner development goals. And I wonder if you could just touch on both of those and how dignity maybe relates to them.
So
Dignity consciousness teaching.
yeah, I just came from a internal development meeting right here at Harvard. We had one, when was it? It was last, I think it was last Tuesday, we had a meeting where the people from Stockholm came and talked about the inner development goals. And I don't know how much your viewers or your listeners understand what that is, but I'll just briefly say that, you know, in 2017, the UN put out these sustainable development goals. There were 17 of them. It's like ending poverty, making sure everybody has healthcare, you know, all the classics. It's like what the Universal Declarations stated too ages ago. But what they discovered, here we are now in 2000, I think it was 2022, they realized there's been zero progress toward these sustainable goals. There's been no progress. And so these brilliant people from Stockholm, Jan, I can't remember Jan's last name, Jan Thomas Borkman, I think his name is Borkman.
Yeah, Thomas Bjorkman.
They decided that they were going to, they felt the problem with these sustainable development goals is that human beings haven't caught up in their own growth and development in order to actually take action on addressing these goals. So it's like human development. I mean, my background is in human development. That's what my PhD is in, human development. And I have been, stating that if our inner worlds don't match up with the needs of our outer world, we're going to see conflict all over the place. And so what they're proposing is that we create these opportunities for people to grow and flourish internally. And they have, I think I have this right here, what they have 5 basic building blocks of these internal development goals. The first one is being, and it has things like self-awareness and presencing. And then they have thinking. How do we think? We have to evolve our thinking. We have to evolve our ability to relate to one another. We have to evolve our ability to collaborate rather than be competitive all the time. And we have to be able to have enough knowledge of all of these things in order to take action toward those goals. So I think this really, I mean, I'm teaming up with this group because I think they've put their finger on internal development goals. I think it's really lovely because it's a way for people to really stop and reflect. Well, where am I on this, on this 5-point scale? How good am I? How self-aware am I on the being end? Or how good am I at being in relationship with others? Or do I collaborate well, or am I still a little competitive? And you can ask yourself all these very simple questions that will help. And one of the things that we're trying to do is figure out how to really intervene to make these things happen. What are the action steps, Paul, that we can take to really engage in that?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to have Thomas Bjorkman take part in an interview with me for the salon.
Wonderful.
Probably the next up. Neil Hawkes is also going to take part, looking at values-based education in the schools. And also Mary Crossan, who's at the Ivy Business School in Canada, is going to look at leadership character and character building. It will be the topic of our discussion as well. So we're fleshing out several of these themes, but they're all related back to dignity, in my opinion, because they're all about how we relate to others and how we relate even to ourselves. If we don't understand that, we're really not going to get very far. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think that just moving on to another point here, the lack of ability to recognize how important dignity is suggests that dignity consciousness should be taught in the way we're describing. But how do we, have you any ideas about, apart from what we've just been discussing, how we might actually try to scale up dignity consciousness?
Yeah, well, that's why you and I are together, right? We're working across the ocean to try to figure out how to scale up this notion that dignity matters, and that we really have to, all of us, not just leaders, but we all have to understand what it would involve in order to develop dignity consciousness or dignity awareness. So I think scaling that up, I think, has to involve bigger structural organizations. Like I'm hoping that here in the US that I can get dignity classes in every single K through 12, you know, in every single school, public schools, because the private schools are already doing it, but I'd like to see it in public schools because I think education is at the core of this. We have to be exposed to this. We have to know this is such a significant part of self-knowledge, is understanding how we're all the same, you know. And you know, and this whole idea that we have to understand each other's differences, which is what the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement is about. It's done such great work. People who are practitioners of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, come to me and they say, Donna, we are now using the dignity model as the basis for this kind of workshops that we're doing and awareness building. And they say that when they talk about dignity as the fundamental piece, where, yeah, we all have different lived experiences, and it's really important to understand that, to understand our differences. But at the end of the day, that's not the last step. The last step is to figure out how we're going to unite, how we're going to bring ourselves together again with our shared human experiences, our shared humanity. And dignity takes us there because we all want it. I have yet to come face to face with a human being who says to me, Paul, dignity? Nah, I don't want that. I don't want any self-worth. I don't want to be treated well. Yeah, I don't care about that. It's what we all, it's our highest common denominator. And I think scaling up it, I mean, and also the fact that we're getting dignity taught in business schools, that's really essential, because there is an opportunity for huge impact, you know, huge impact, especially with international corporations and the like. So, but I don't know, I would love to hear from people watching this today if they have ideas about scaling it up, because you and I think we would be open to hearing any input around that issue, because it's, I mean, I think our species is dependent upon the fact that we get this and get it deeply inside us. I really don't know how much longer we're going to be able to survive as a species if we don't figure this out. I mean, that sounds kind of catastrophic, but that's where I am. That's what motivates me to keep going.
Actually, that point refers back to one of the major concerns that came out of the interview, the first one we did for the salon, which was with Indy Johar, who said we worry about climate breakdown, but actually social breakdown is going to happen much sooner than climate breakdown. And we're already starting to see it happen. Yeah. So, you know, we're talking a lot about relationships and how we improve relationships. You know, at the very time we need cooperation and collaboration more than ever to solve 21st century type problems, is the time when we're becoming more divided, more polarized. And so, yeah, we must at some point face up to and recognize that there's only one way we're actually going to survive as a species if we don't get our act together. So then, I was going to ask you, in your experience when you've been working with people on dignity consciousness exercises, to what extent do people tell you afterwards that it's kind of changed their values and what they value? Has it made them stop and think about what their values and what they value?
You know, I don't really use the language of values because what I want to impart to people is that getting that first piece, because I think values is the second piece, and I'll say more in a minute. The first piece, that we all have dignity. Each and every one of us, every human being that's born into this world has dignity. And not only are we valuable, but we're invaluable, as I just said, priceless and irreplaceable. So if that's the truth, and I believe it is a fundamental truth, that we all have dignity, that then we better figure out how to act like it. We better figure out how to actually operationalize this notion that dignity is important and we need to treat each other that way. I think values comes in there, and that piece, which is about operationalizing dignity. I value not only myself, but others as well. And in order to demonstrate that, in order to act like that, I have to do some learning. I have to make some commitments to wanting to make the world a better place here. And, you know, I in my second book, I say that there's three ways to understand dignity consciousness. There's actually three things that dignity consciousness embodies, and that is connection, connection, and connection. And the first connection is to our own dignity, as like we've just talked about extensively. We need to know that, because if we don't value our own dignity, we're not going to see it and value it in others either. We're going to see other people as a threat. And, you know, we get into that whole self-preservation notion of being in the world. Now, the second connection is, like I said, to other people. We can see and value the dignity of any human being. And the third connection is valuing and being connected to something that's greater than ourselves. And, you know, some people can use their faith, you know, they're connected to their creator. That's a valuable connection for them. Others, you know, other people say, like a lot of my students would say to me, you know, Donna, I want to be created. I mean, I want to be connected to something bigger than myself. I want to be working on a project that's going to reduce climate change, or is going to bring out the best in people, and we learn how to live together peacefully. And so that third connection for them is like having meaning and having purpose in their life. And when they have meaning and purpose, they're living their values, you know, they're stating, okay, this is important to me. I'm going to be connected to my own dignity. I'm going to see it and look for it in others. And I'm also going to behave in such a way where I'm going to try to contribute to the greater good here. Something bigger than, you know.
That third one gets back to Viktor Frankl again and the meaning. He describes the search for meaning as the most fundamental human driver.
Yeah.
So we've kind of gone around the loop there.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Which is good news. We're coming towards the end of the conversation now, but I wanted to just quickly cover, well, hopefully we can cover a few last points quite quickly. Yeah, I wanted to talk about an aspect of dignity which is very commonly talked about we haven't touched on at all today, which is around end of life. And it was one of the first things that got me to recognize the importance of dignity as being the thing that we value more than anything else. Because when somebody's facing the end of their life, what they most fear is dying without dignity. They want a dignified end.
Right.
And I wonder if you just talk about the benefits of dignity consciousness in coping with, for example, a terminal sickness or old age.
Yes, I mean, I can personally relate to that because my precious beloved mother just died at 95 years old. And one of the things that my sisters and I decided was we wanted to make this a most dignified ending. And one of the things that she wanted to do, for example, was to be in her own home. She didn't want to go into a hospital, and, you know, and so everybody kind of rallied. And one of my sisters, especially, who lives in the same house as my mother, just made that commitment to really try to figure out what their last desires are, like wanting to die at home, for example, and to, you know, and to treat them not as little children who need, you know, who are demented and who need to just be swiftly taken care of, but to really really get to the point where you're trying to understand deep. That's again, this element of dignity, seeking deeper understanding. What are their needs right now? What do they want? You know, talk to them about how they want to go about this. we talked to my mom about her burial, what she wanted, and because it's recognizing that at the end of her life, she is still deciding and making choices for herself. But you can't do that if you don't have those conversations first.
Yeah, I guess we could apply quite a few of the 10
We
major
could.
elements when you're thinking about it.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's true. And making her feel safe, making her feel understood, making her feel acknowledged for, what she's, and, letting them talk is, I mean, what we discovered is giving them an opportunity to like reflect on their lives, going back and talking about um, various milestones or whatever it is they want. But it's not just taking care of their physical needs, but we're talking about taking care of their dignity needs as well, giving them a voice, making them feel heard, making them feel seen, listened to. It's really it's kind of like dignity skills on steroids, because you really have to have a lot of patience, because it's easier to just say, okay, goodbye, I'll see you.
Yeah,
Uh, but you have to hang in there, and you can see the peace on their face when they're about to go. And that's one of the things my sisters and I felt like, okay, we saw that peacefulness. She died the way she wanted to. And so you don't stop honoring people's dignity. In fact, you have to escalate it when they're in their final days, I would say.
yeah, and there are implications in what you've just said for the people involved in the medical profession generally,
Yeah.
in terms of patient care and understanding patient dignity. We've covered that in parts of our other work, and it's quite interesting to reflect on that some more. One thing, just very finally, we've not really touched on, but I'll just mention it because it is quite important, and that is the fact that dignity is the number one and the foundational article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And actually, many of the other articles then are just about creating the conditions in which it's possible for somebody to live a dignified life. And some of those are directly related to the 10 elements. When you talk about safety, for example, is one of the articles, um, and also the right to belong is one of the articles as well. So they're the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But then the Sustainable Development Goals are also all about creating the conditions in which somebody can live a dignified life. But I get kind of frustrated because they're all only the basics.
Yeah.
And we should have much bigger ambitions as human beings, as a society. You know, it's it's devastating to think that we won't achieve the sustainable development goals within the time horizon. But it's, to me, even more devastating to think that even if we did, they're far short of what we should be aiming for. And dignity isn't only about having the basics in life. Dignity, because some elements of it are very relative, aren't they?
Yes.
The inequality, especially inequality in societies, inequality of opportunity, all of those kind of things are great sources of resentment and feelings of indignity.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. No, I mean, I learned this early on, Paul, when, gosh, I came to Harvard in 1991 to do a postdoctoral fellowship to learn international conflict resolution. And while I was the summer that I was at Harvard doing my fellowship, um, I was asked to go to Cambodia to work with the UN agencies that were there right after Pol Pot, was ousted, and they were trying to rebuild the society or writing the Constitution and all that. And one of the things that I was supposed to do was to help the women of Cambodia understand that they had specific rights under the CEDAW, for example, and the Universal Declaration. And what we discovered there was that, yes, the women understood all of the declaration and all of those, the healthcare, access to healthcare, education, and all that. But they said, what about our everyday lives? We need to be treated with dignity, not just through the, through all of these other goals of the Declaration, but we want our husbands to treat us with dignity. We want our community to recognize that we are equal citizens, and so there's deeper and deeper levels that we can learn about this, and that's really what inspired me to write that first book. Was, wow, these people are really understanding that there's a psychological component to these all these profound UN conventions that were created. And the psychological component is what happens in everyday interactions and everyday relationships, not just at home, but in the workplace and how you're viewed. So those are way deeper issues than what either the SDGs or the human rights documents declaration spelled out. That was revolutionary at the time when they did that, right? I mean, we're grateful to them for everything they've done. What I'm learning about this, having worked with this every single day for the last 3 decades, is that I keep learning more. I keep refining the depths of this, Paul. There are deeper and deeper layers and levels of significance of how we interact with one another, how we put this into practice. I actually, at the end of the day, I think that, understanding dignity and treating people with dignity is spiritual practice. It is really trying to walk a talk that is mostly aspirational for us at this time. And so we have to learn how to do it. And I'm never stopping. And this is why I love opportunities like this, because I'm hoping that we can engage in a deeper discussion with others, Paul, about what the implications of all of this, what they are on us as individual humans, but also as members of the human species.
A very good point to end. And I was just trying to find, and I can't find it right now to be able to quote it properly, a quote from Anne Frank, who basically said that we've all got the power. The essence of what she's saying is we've all got the power to change the world starting now. We can change the world, and this is it. We can all change the world, starting by committing ourselves to becoming agents of dignity.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll explore further in further programs and things that we do as the Aligned Enterprise Academy. We'll be offering things that you can join to dig into this theory and this framework, the model, I think, as you describe it, in a lot more detail. We'll be running in the Leading with Dignity program again.
Well, I also want to make one last point, Paul, and that is, I'm talking and we're talking a lot about the human dignity here, but we also could have another 2-hour session on the dignity of the planet and the universe and the dignity of nature. So it extends, it's, there's no line that says that we don't need to treat the natural world with dignity. We do. We got to figure that one out too.
Welcome to this interview for the
so many
Salon
environmentalists
with Dr.
are
Donna
working
Hicks.
on, and it's the dignity of the planet.
Donna is an associate at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs at Harvard University,
respect and acknowledge
and the former deputy director of the program on international conflict analysis and resolution.
And that includes
She facilitated dialogues in numerous unofficial diplomatic efforts in the Middle East, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Colombia,
before we just
Cuba,
finish, is there
Libya,
anything
and Syria.
that you wish I'd asked
She was
you
also a
during
consultant to the BBC in Northern Ireland, where she co-facilitated a television series,
sometimes it's really
Facing
hard.
the Future,
Sometimes
with
you'll have a
Archbishop
relationship
Desmond
that
Tutu.
won't budge.
And she got to know John
relationship
Aldice,
that's been
Lord
so
Aldice,
broken.
who you may remember
But
having
I think
interviewed in a
every
previous
day we have opportunities to
contribution
extend
to
dignity
the
to
Salon.
others. And just the
Donna
reminder
has
that
taught courses
what
in
you
conflict
said early
resolution
on
at
is
Harvard
that
and at
when
Columbia
we
universities,
honor
and
somebody's
conducts
dignity, we
seminars in the
strengthen
US and
our
abroad
own.
on
And I
dignity
think just
leadership
remembering
training
that it's not just
and on the
giving
role
away
dignity
this
plays in
dignity
resolving conflict.
recognition, but the
She also
interaction, the
consults to
dynamic that
corporations,
we engage in
governments,
when we honor
schools,
somebody's
churches,
dignity
non-governmental
us just as much as
organisations
it
and
affects
others
them.
on the same topics.
Actually, that's
Her
a
book,
very good last point
Dignity,
to end
Its
on.
Essential Role in Resolving Conflict, was published by Yale University Press in 2011, and her second book, Leading with Dignity, How to Create a Culture that Brings Out the Best in People, was published by Yale University Press in August 2018. Based on the lessons in Leading with Dignity, the Enlightened Enterprise Academy co-created a program together with Donna, which will be rerunning again soon in an improved format. So we'll get into the interview shortly, but first let me introduce the Enlightened Enterprise Academy, the Salon, and this first series of interviews.